Perfect. All right. Looks like things are rolling in that regard. I can see the transcription. So we're good to start official introductions. Excellent, excellent. So welcome to everybody on the call today. My name is Galen Shostrom. I am an ally member of the MnDOT African American Employee Resource Group. They are the official hosts today, but we are also grateful for cross promotion from the MnDOT or the Minnesota GIS Bytes Collaborative, serving all of the various geographic information science practitioners across the state enterprise of Minnesota, as well as the Equity Justice Black Caucus Enterprise Resource Group, of which I'm also an ally member and the communications co-chair for. They have also cross-promoted to help get as many folks in the door for today's presentation as possible. We are extremely excited to have the Mapping Prejudice program from the University of Minnesota back with us today. That's actually marked the third presentation that we've been able to host with Kirsten Delegard and other experts from the Mapping Prejudice team. Kirsten is on the call with us. I'm going to turn things over so that she can introduce both the Mapping Prejudice program in her own words, as well as our featured presenter today. That's Kelly Rogers, one of the researchers and outreach specialists with the Mapping Prejudice team. So I won't say any more than that because it's best to let folks describe their work in their own program or their own words, only to say that the Mapping Prejudice team is already an established gold standard bearer for reckoning with complex historical context in racial inequity, as well as developing frameworks for engaging with those complex historical contexts and bringing as many people to the table as possible. MnDOT's African American Employee Resource Group, other groups within MnDOT feel incredibly privileged to have been able to participate in this framework development, in this context and history sharing over the last several years. One last thing I'll put a plug in for is that Mapping Prejudice previous two programs with MnDOT can be viewed as part of our ERG recordings on YouTube, and I will make sure that those recordings are highlighted in the chat as our program proceeds today. So without any further ado, still 10 minutes under the wire here. That's great. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kirsten, just to say thank you again. It's so great to have you back with us.
Well, thank you all for having us. We love doing these presentations and working with all of you, and I'm especially grateful to all of you for your patience today as we wrestled with technology, because we are a tech team, I just want to say. So anyway, I always love that when we get tripped up there. So my name is Kirsten Delegard, and I am a public historian and one of the co-founders of Mapping Prejudice, which, as you've already said, is based at the University of Minnesota Libraries. And we have been around as a team since 2016. And since that time, we have been working with community members to identify and map racial covenants. And racial covenants are clauses that were inserted into property records that prohibited people who are not white from buying or even occupying certain pieces of land. So together with our community map makers, we have been making maps that are meant to be tools for people. They're tools for people to understand their own personal history. They're tools for people to understand how their neighborhoods took shape. And they're tools for a really wide variety of people and community of professionals and community activists and community change makers who are working to address racial disparities and dismantle structural racism. I'm a narrative historian, so the map is also a way of surfacing stories. I think that's how I understand my world, that stories help us understand how we got to the place that we are today. So one of the fundamental premises of Mapping Prejudice is that I believe that it's really critical to understand the past, because that's how we shape the future. That's one of our organizing principles. And today, as Galen already said, I'm presenting alongside my colleague, Kelly Rogers. And the two of us are going to talk about Mapping Prejudice. And I think the thing that will be new to many of you for this presentation, because I know many of you have been with us in the past, is that we're going to highlight some recent work that we've done to create a new digital exhibit called The House That You Built. So we hope that this exhibit will be interesting to those of you with connections to the University of Minnesota. But our larger goal here is to prompt you or provide inspiration for all of you to reflect on your own institutional homes as you think about how to plan and maintain our transportation infrastructure here in Minnesota. So today I want to start by issuing you a challenge. What does the kind of work that we're describing here look like for the Minnesota DOT? And how could the kind of historical recovery work that we've done at the University of Minnesota help your agency as you think about the road ahead? Okay. So I'm putting some questions here on the screen that I want you to just keep in your brain as we're talking. So is there anything that surprises you about the material that we're presenting? What are the legacies of the history that we're presenting you with today? How do you see yourself in this history? How does this connect to your work? And I would assert that one of the reasons that this collaboration that we have had with DOT is so fruitful is that the University of Minnesota and the MnDOT are two of the most important institutions in our state today. And with that in mind, I think it's critically important that these institutions understand their roles in shaping history. But the work has only begun, right? So it just begun. So what other stories do we need to be telling to create a fuller understanding of these institutions and their impact? And this is not work that any one person or any one organization can do on their own. So what new knowledge do you want to create? And finally, how can we do this together? So that's some of the framework that we're going to be using today. So if you, again, I have already demonstrated my inability to use Microsoft Teams, but if you want to share, as we're talking, share your thoughts in the chat. I think that's a really great way to just start sparking the conversation. So I'm going to start my narrative with a map. So this map it shows freeways and Black neighborhoods in 1940 in the Twin Cities, and it helps us to see that the construction of the urban freeway system in the United States was designed to do more than move cars. It was used to drive what urban planners called urban renewal. So freeways were central to this larger campaign. So these darker polygons on the map that is up right now show where Black people are living in 1940 in the Twin Cities. And here are our contemporary freeways. So you can see that the freeways that we use today were built through every part of the Twin Cities that had substantial numbers of Black residents at the moment when the interstate freeway system was first being built. So just to point out, like just to help you orient yourself on the map, you see here's Rondo, here's the old South Side, here's Cedar Riverside, here's the near North Side. So each one of these freeway projects shuttered businesses, it scattered established communities, and it displaced people from their homes. And the people who were displaced, especially people who are not white, really struggled to find new places to live. At the same time that the freeways were being built, of course, in the Twin Cities, new suburban neighborhoods were also being built, but they just were not an option for many of the people who were displaced. They were affordable, as this ad announces. It declares that homes in the Lexington Park subdivision were priced to make it possible for the average worker to purchase on terms like rent. But they barred people who were not white. They were restricted with covenants like this one, which was written by Suburban Properties. And Suburban Properties was a developer that wrote many of the covenants that we have found in suburban Ramsey County. So, of course, this story is not unique to the Twin Cities. Every American city has a historically Black neighborhood that was, quote unquote, demolished, slashed in two, or cut off from the rest of the city by a highway. And this is not an accident. The visualization that I started with demonstrates this visualization demonstrates that racial covenants, what we study as a team, always need to be situated in a larger context. These unjust deeds were not the only thing that were blocking people who are not white from owning land or finding stable or affordable housing. They worked in concert with discriminatory lending practices, with real estate steering, and white violence. But racial covenants were a particularly effective driver of racial exclusion. So I'm going to show you some racial covenants, or at least one racial covenant, and I just want you to take care as I present this. There's disturbing language here, so please be aware of that. So this is the earliest racial covenant that we have identified in the Twin Cities. It's from South Minneapolis, and they at a moment, these became very common at a moment when fears about race mixing were on the rise. And these kinds of contracts were promoted by people in every industry, government officials at every level. They were justified by researchers and academics in every discipline. And our team has documented 35,000 of these kinds of racial covenants that I have here on the screen just in Minnesota. But again, they're in no way unique to the state. They were used in every community across the country to create exclusively white neighborhoods. They were horrendously effective, but they weren't the only thing again. So we have mobilized more than 11,000 volunteers to document these racist legal clauses. Community members read and discuss these property records, and then they transcribe the information that we need to put these racist restrictions on a map. And you can see the work of our community map makers on this map. This is our time-lapse map, which shows the spread of racial covenants over time in the Twin Cities. We started our work just documenting racial covenants in Hennepin County. We moved to Ramsey County, and then over the last 2 years, we have expanded our scope to include all the counties in the Twin Cities metro area. We're working with the Met Council to generate that data. We show this, we call it our contagion map of racial covenants in every presentation that we do, because it provides a very fast and visceral history lesson in less than a minute. And I will say that this time-lapse map has really changed our collective understanding of these racist restrictions and structural racism in Minnesota. It helps people understand contemporary racial disparities while also illustrating the consequences of past policies and practices that we live with today. But one thing that we have learned over the course of doing this work is that a lot of the work that we thought was going to be done by this final map is actually done in the process of making the map. That the process of reading these deeds, reading these primary sources, opens our volunteers' hearts and minds, and it cracks open their imaginations for new futures. So racial covenants are not legal today. And that's because civil rights activists spent most of the 20th century campaigning against racial covenants in both the courts and in legislatures, and then finally in Congress. And it's thanks to this activism that racial covenants were outlawed in Minnesota in 1963. Congress made racial covenants illegal everywhere in the United States in 1968. And so whenever I get to this point of the narrative, people ask a very important question, which is, why do we care? Why should we put all this work into finding out where these outdated restrictions were put into place? I would say that one of the reasons is that the data that we are using to build the map also helps us to demonstrate the ongoing legacies of these kinds of restrictions, that racial covenants, documenting racial covenants, helps us to understand how we got to this place. And so this is the place that we are today. This is according to the most up-to-date data from the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, which demonstrates or shows that the Twin Cities have the highest racial homeownership gap in the nation. That means that 75% of white families own their own homes, while only 33% of Black families can make the same claim. So racial covenants are part of the story. They blocked homeownership for many Black families. And families who were shut out of homeownership had a harder time passing wealth to the next generation. And this continues to reverberate today. Without family down payment assistance, it's harder for young people today to become homeowners. And this is at a time when the cost of houses, the cost of buying a house is skyrocketing. And economists have used our research to demonstrate that houses, that in 2019, houses that had racial covenants in Minneapolis, any houses in Minneapolis with racial covenants were worth 15% more than identical houses that never had covenants. So again, this is more than 50 years after the Fair Housing Act made these racist restrictions illegal. And again, today in the Twin Cities, areas that had racial covenants are still overwhelmingly white. And again, this is more than 50 years after the Fair Housing Act. So that's what this map shows. You can see the green indicates where covenants were put into place, and the purple represents where Black people are living in the Twin Cities today. And there's not a lot of overlap between the green and the purple. The areas that had covenants, long illegal, right, are still the whitest areas today. So to understand how covenants not only blocked future progress, but really reshaped the city, we have to go back in time. We have to turn the clock back. As covenants spread in the first half of the 20th century, they really changed the landscape of the city. So I showed you that first racial covenant from 1910. When that covenant was put into place, Minneapolis and St. Paul were pretty integrated. That's what this is a corporate racial demographic map from 1910, and it shows that there's a smattering of Black residents living all over Minneapolis and St. Paul. That's what the lighter polygons show. Again, like the purple polygons indicate the presence of Black residents. So in 1910, you can start to see covenants in the green appearing on the map. And as these covenants begin to spread, Black residents were being pushed into a couple of neighborhoods in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Again, it continues in 1930 and by 1940, you have those concentrated neighborhoods that I showed you with the freeway map, that Black residents had been pushed into Rondo in St. Paul, the Old South Side, the near North Side of Minneapolis, and Cedar Riverside. And these covenants were just one of the things that really changed the city. You also have, we go to oral histories and newspaper reports that showed that neighborhoods that did not have racial covenants there was a lot of white violence in those areas. Covenants provided justification and social support for white people who wanted to keep people who are not white out of their neighborhoods. Neighborhoods that didn't have racial covenants were subjected to redlining, and that's a term I'm sure that most of you, that you've all heard before, and it's kind of a blanket term it's used as a blanket term to refer to discriminatory lending practices. But it really refers to a federal practice in the 1930s. The federal government commissioned local appraisers to go out to neighborhoods and determine whether or not they were safe investments for lenders. And they deemed neighborhoods that were mixed race hazardous and colored them in red. And that meant that people who lived in mixed race neighborhoods, in large part because of covenants and because of these other things I'm talking about, it became much harder for them to accumulate wealth through property ownership. It also made those areas, those redlined areas, really, they became targets for what planners called urban renewal. So this is where the story that I'm telling you, all this history, connects back directly to our team, to Mapping Prejudice, to the University of Minnesota, because today our team is housed in Wilson Library, which is on the west bank of the University of Minnesota. So the west bank of the University of Minnesota is built in one of these areas that was redlined. Here we've created a close-up of the area description for the West Bank with the text that the appraisers wrote describing the area. They described this neighborhood as hazardous. And the reason for that is the text that I put up here. For the past 20 years, there's been no new development. At the present time, many Jews and Scandinavians and Negroes reside in this area. So this logic on this map provided, or this language and this map provide the logic that led to the demolition of this racially mixed neighborhood. And again, the University of Minnesota then claimed this area, this space, for a major expansion, which was the West Bank. So I've just, the star that you see on the map here indicates where I'm standing right now in Wilson Library. So I just want to pause my speaking for a second here to take a poll. And so we've never done this before. And considering the way the technology has gone so far today, I hope it works. But I want to do a quick poll of all of you to figure out, like, how many of you have direct connections to the University of Minnesota? So Kelly, can you do the thing?
The poll is in the chat right now. Yeah.
Okay.
It should be popping up on people's screens in the center of the presentation as well, but it's also in the chat. So wherever you're able to see it and respond to it, please go ahead. And also this is fully anonymous. No names will be stored here, so you don't have to worry about private data being retained or anything like that.
Right. Okay. So here's the questions. Right. Okay. So how many of you have connections to the University of Minnesota? Do you have a U of M, a U of M undergraduate degree, a U of M graduate degree, a child at the University of Minnesota, another family member who's attended the U of M? Do you have season tickets for a Gopher sports team? Several of the above, all of the above, I guess none of the above, or are you a Badger? I mean, we believe in inclusivity here. So are you actually just a Wisconsin fan? Okay, so how do we find out?
You can select more than one answer. Just to sorry to cut you off, Kirsten. You can select more than one, which is why the none of the above or all of the above or many of the above are we didn't need to include those because they can select however many they need.
Okay, so do we have results? How do we? What
They're
do we
coming
do now?
in. If you look in the chat, Kristen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right now we have in the lead another family member who has attended the U of M at 43%. And 20%, that's 104 votes. And then the undergraduate degree, 50 people have received their undergraduate from the U of M, 32 have received their graduate degree from the U of M, 18 have a child at the U of M, 7 people have season tickets to a sports team, and 26 Badgers in our mix. 2 people voted other. I feel like there's maybe more others than are
I think somebody added a other option in the chat. I think that's what the check or the X button is. Sorry about that omission on my behalf.
Okay.
So yeah, it looks like we've got 67 responses so far, also registering as none of the aboves, if I'm interpreting that correctly.
Well, I just want to say this was not meant to be any kind of scientific study of any kind. I was more making a rhetorical point, and just that one of our assertions is that we are all living in the house that the U built. And this even goes for those of you who, I saw someone attended school in Texas, or Wisconsin, I'm sorry. But the house that you built is the title of the digital exhibit that we created to explore how the University of Minnesota fits into the practices that are being documented by Mapping Prejudice. And the stories that we have assembled for this exhibit are relevant not just for those of us who are on campus today, or even those of us who have a direct connection to the University of Minnesota. I would say that they are relevant to anyone who lives and pays taxes in the university, in the state of Minnesota, because we are all connected to this very large and influential public institution. So I've put the QR code that will take you to the exhibit, and you can can click on that and while I'm talking and just poke around and see what is interesting to you. There's a lot of material here, so it's not something that you would be able to read and digest in just a couple minutes. So again, like our MO is that we go out to a lot of groups and talk about our work. So this is the backstory of why we decided to create this exhibit. We have, of course, gone to DOT, we've gone to the state capitol, we've attended lots of professional conferences, the Federal Reserve, we've gone to a witches coven in South Minneapolis. And a lot of times when we go to these different groups, people say they're actually not interested in what happened in the past, that people say they want to know the way forward. But again, like as I said in the beginning, we believe that the first step towards a more just future is an honest engagement with the past, and that we need to acknowledge how we arrived at this place. And one of the things that we always suggest with volunteers, if they think about like now that they're aware of this history, we ask them to look at their institutions where they have influence and explore what role did their institution play and what can they do today. So when our team received a grant from the Mellon Foundation in 2021, we decided that it was imperative that we take our own advice. We wanted to demonstrate that we didn't see our institutional home of the University of Minnesota as outside of all this history that we're documenting. That we decided we wanted to use this grant in part to deepen our collaboration with community members, and to be a good partner, we had to acknowledge our own institutional history. So again, this is the genesis of the house that you built. So this exhibit that I put up a couple slides ago, where you can click and look at it. It examines how the University of Minnesota fits into these things we studied. We started with one question. We wanted to know whether there were racial covenants on university-owned land, and whether the university had played a role in putting these racist restrictions in place. This seemed like a very important question because the university is one of the state's largest landholders. It's one of the most significant real estate developers in the state. But the simplest queries, the single questions, are frequently the hardest to answer, and this was no exception. We found there was no easy way to get comprehensive data about the University of Minnesota's land holdings over time, not just present day. So this means we have to hold this question for a future moment when we can get more data, when we have more ability to map racial covenants across the state, especially since so much of the land that the University of Minnesota owns is in rural areas, and we haven't been able to get all the property records from all the 80 plus counties in the state of Minnesota. But we always put racial covenants in a larger social context. So that's what we decided to do with the University of Minnesota. And we did original research, but we built on decades of work that's been done here at the university and elsewhere. We combed through materials that were assembled for the Campus Divided exhibit that was put up in 2017. We studied the maps and data that were created for the High Country News series Land Grab Universities. We used the sources that were featured in the report that the University of Minnesota's Task Force on Building Names and Institutional History put together. And one of the more recent additions to this big pile of research is the Truth Report, which gives us a window into the university's expropriation of Indigenous land over time. So our investigation illuminated a series of interlocking stories that feature students, administrators, and donors to the University of Minnesota. The first section, A Foundation of Stolen Land, connects the growth of the university to this larger history of Indigenous land disposition. And but that's just the first story. As the university grew, students, faculty, and staff who are not white were not welcome on campus. The second section of the map, which we've called Building White Supremacy, documents how people in Klan regalia were tolerated at university football games and a homecoming parade. This created a hostile environment, but the university also took other steps to ensure people who are not white would not have equal access to its resources and facilities. The third section, Walls to Preserve Whiteness, narrates how Black students were barred from dormitories built by the university. And house hunting in a gated city explains the implications of campus housing policies for students who are not white. A Klansman of public spirit tells the story of Earl Brown, who donated 750 acres to the university in 1949. Brown was Hennepin County Sheriff and also a member of the Klan, and university leaders overlooked that association in their eagerness to accept what had been one of the largest donations in the history of the institution. They also refused to work with civil rights groups when the land was that was donated by Brown was turned into a residential development in Brooklyn Center. This meant that Black people, including an administrator at the University of Minnesota, were barred from buying new homes in the Garden City subdivision, which was developed on Brown's land. And finally, the house the U built links the construction of the West Bank of the University of Minnesota to the destruction of the Seven Corners neighborhood, which is now known as the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. And again, like as my earlier maps show, when racial covenants were enforced, this was one of the few places in the Twin Cities where people who are not white could find a place to live. So this is what directly connects to our project, because it's on this land that Mapping Prejudice is now located. Our office is on the 4th floor of Wilson Library, which was a state-of-the-art research library when it was constructed in 1968. And this is the point where I'm going to hand it off to Kelly Rogers, who's going to talk about the relationship between the historic Seven Corners neighborhood and the contemporary West Bank and the university. Kelly, take it away.
Awesome, thanks. You can go ahead and move to the next slide too, Kirsten. Thank you. Yeah, so we have kind of been grappling with this co-occurring history, the fact that you can't really separate the expansion of the West Bank campus from the construction of the Twin Cities freeway system. As a little background on my own sort of area of interest in this history, I did a project that studied the rhetorical strategies used to kind of manufacture consent within stakeholders in the neighborhood prior to their removal. And the university played an extremely active role in not only making the case that the university is a public good, so that taxpayers have a vested interest in its success and its expansion, but also that the facilities that they were removing would be improved under this redevelopment plan. And the city worked very closely with the university to use the power of eminent domain in kind of lockstep to move through the neighborhood and turn it into the footprint that it has today. Could you click again, Kristen? And so we visited this map earlier, this visual earlier, but I want to go a little bit deeper into this question of blight. So what it means for a neighborhood to be blighted is first an observation that these planners were making, and the definition that was applied, the criteria that had to be met in order for it to be considered blighted, had real material and legal consequences. This map was drawn in the 1940s, and in 1952, the Seven Corners Library, which is the specific institution that we're going to be zooming in on today, had 50,000, circulated 50,000 items of material, had a staff that was robust, and served a really vibrant community of stakeholders that also belonged to the university. And so this kind of conscription, this way of seeing the neighborhood as blighted, was in service to a really specific goal, and this kind of time marker is important because we'll see what kind of happens, how the neighborhood attitudes change toward the neighborhood after this designation is assigned. Next slide. And so this is the outside, the exterior of the Seven Corners Library. A fantastic researcher named Treasure Tinsley is working on a chapter for a book project that really digs into the living history of this neighborhood beyond the fact that it was just there. But what we know and what she's been able to unearth from her archival research working in the Hennepin County Public Library's records is that the library served as a really critical hub for public life in this neighborhood, and where many European and white immigrants who were moving to the Twin Cities had options on where to live. Cedar Riverside stood as a kind of island. And the Seven Corners neighborhood stood as a kind of island on the inside of those restrictions, where people who were not white could have a safe place to land. And for non-white people, relocation was far more difficult. The racially restrictive covenants that we talked about, the racial violence, and the de facto segregation that forced Black and Jewish people and other people of color to move into neighborhoods that were experiencing similar divestment became a way of thinking about the consequence of these groups being present in a given neighborhood or geography. Click again for me, Kristen. I love this second picture. It shows the inside of the reading room of the Seven Corners Library. There's so much rich documentation of how this of how this space really functioned in community. Yeah, so by 1952, the branch employed 3 full-time librarians. It was a branch of Minneapolis Public Libraries, just to clarify, and had additional staff, circulated over 50,000 items, and had a really robust intersection of people who benefited from its resource, including the University of Minnesota and Augsburg College. And this was growth that happened over a period of around 30 years. Opened in 1912, the physical location did, and it was the only kind of public space of its kind that really made the intellectual life of these residents deeper. Next slide for me. And so, at the same time that this institution is being is kind of coming into its own and capturing more interest from community members, the University of Minnesota is also faced with significant constraints on its East Bank campus. Questions of parking, surface parking, and housing came up in the wake of the post World War II boom, and the GI Bill's ability to make college education more accessible than ever before. Record enrollment increased the pressures on the university to find a place to expand, and this was complicated by several constraints, both social and infrastructural, because of the railroads on the East Bank, and also the populations that already lived on the East Bank, which were primarily white and wealthy professors and other kinds of professionals who lived in Prospect Park, which was actually where the freeway was originally proposed to cut through. And so this, I don't know how well you can read the item on the screen right now, but this was part of that rhetorical investigation that I was doing, looking through university administrators' documents as they were sort of creating the exterior communication about what was coming to the expansion of the West Bank. And notably in this resource, you can see that the president of the university quotes Horace Greeley, who is credited with the quote, "Go West, young man," closely associated with Manifest Destiny, this idea that white people had a God-given duty to colonize and expand across the United States. And I find that especially fascinating because it really shows the way that they saw Seven Corners as a place to conquer, a place to sanitize, and to change in their image, and that was happening in conjunction with the freeways. So this was published in 1962 as part of an op-ed, and you can go ahead and click again, Kirsten. the legislature was also putting a lot of pressure on the university to explain exactly why they needed these facilities to expand and be invested in by public tax payers. And so they mentioned very explicitly the opportunity that the university presents to this neighborhood that is, unable to save itself. And along the way, throughout this debate, the Department of Transportation is purchasing different plots of land that are being affected by that label of blight. And the U broke ground in 1960 on its West Bank campus. You can click again, Kristen. And slowly marched across the neighborhood in lockstep with the freeways. The promise of the encroaching infrastructure brought with it material changes to the neighborhood. Here you can see the houses in the foreground with the Social Sciences Tower and what's now Heller Hall being built in the background. Alongside a press release that was given to all the major publications in town bragging about this pillar of innovation. And so as this construction is happening, the rest of the neighborhood doesn't evaporate overnight. It goes into a slow and long decline. And by 1964, the Seven Corners neighborhood branch closed with only 25 to 30 steady users per month, a really significant stark decrease. And that same year, the legislature appropriated $4 million to fund the construction of Wilson Library. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Wait, can you go back one? So the Department of Highways sat on the property rather than acquiring it at its market value. And despite multiple requests from relief for the owners, they could not find another buyer. This building had a really particular style of architecture. It's not suited for residential living. It was like very Gothic and ornate. And so there was literally no other option as these other parcels around it were being acquired than for the freeways to purchase it. And rather than purchasing it when it was appraised, it was appraised for $100,000 in 1964. They sat on it until 1966 and sold for $34,000 less than it was originally appraised. And the library sought external legal advice on whether it could, recoup that lost funding. But the courts ruled against them because of the deterioration of the neighborhood. And so I think that what the Seven Corners neighborhood really illuminates is this like the material consequences of this process of the self-fulfilling prophecy that blighting a neighborhood really ascribed to these places. And so I think that with any critical history of an institution, MnDOT, the U of M, the question that we're really responsible for answering as researchers is what we make of the stories that we excavate. I am entering my last semester as an undergraduate student in the College of Liberal Arts here at the U. I'm an urban studies major. And I have become very acutely aware of the challenges that are facing our society at large. And as a training historian, I'm also really conscious of the links between the past and the present, and feel strongly that if we only dredge up the ways that we have caused pain in the past without a vision of how it can inform our future, that the raised consciousness part of this exercise can quickly devolve into fatigue and powerlessness. And so I want to make it clear that our goal is not to expose the university's power, but to also expose its potential. Not to trap the institution in a tangled, messy past, but to extend our collective memory and ground our contributions to the university in a broader context. That can inspire both resistance and innovation on campus, which if you're paying attention to the news, it is very, very needed right now, this kind of active engagement with our institution's future. And so as we reckon with the house the U built, it's also important that we consider the house the U is building today. Next slide. So we've been hosting active engagements on our campus about this digital exhibit. And for our launch, we extended a broad invitation to this event with students, faculty, and staff from across the university. 50 people joined us for dinner and conversation at a spot on our campus that's for community engaged events called The Hub. We ate dinner together, like I mentioned, and then we divided everybody into random groups that were led by designated faculty with intersections in this work. And each group explored a section of the story map with the intention of unpacking not just what the material is in the story map, but also how it relates to our position in the university today. We scattered these groups with the intention of actively breaking down the hierarchies that often characterize our relationships to one another inside of the university, and to foster a space for authentic, good faith engagement. And in real time, we witnessed the convergence of both diverse expertise and lived experience, and the sparking of new insights and building relationships that can outlast the event itself. This is a collection of communications that we got from different people who were involved as students and people who were facilitating their groups. And the overwhelming impression was that it felt like the university was kind of back to what it was pre-COVID, a place for collaboration and exchange and kind of processing, which has been lost in recent years. So there's this pervasive narrative that the academy is succumbing to the division and apathy that's been more broadly observed in public life. But I think, like Blight, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that we're well positioned to disrupt. And I would extend that to any institution that has a complicated past. As we stare down the challenges of the next 4 years, there's no question that the humanities, like mapping prejudice, will bear much of that weight. But the university was created as a public good, and it's our duty to make that value manifest. Claiming this history as an opportunity to create a deepened sense of belonging to our institutions makes it easier to forge authentic communications and connections with communities that we're mission bound to serve. The university's expansion was largely funded with taxpayer dollars on the promise that its growth would be in service to the public good. And stories like the house that you built can help us ensure that we make good on that promise. So this is really an invitation to encourage you to reimagine the places that we inherit, the histories that we inherit as participants in these organizations, not just as a reflection of what they've been, but as a vision of what they can become. An agent for change, a refuge of resources, and a space to grapple with the big questions while devising innovative solutions that do not yet exist. We've presented the University of Minnesota as a case study for why it's important to engage in your institutional history. But you're probably wondering what that has to do with you, because you guys are working in a very different sector. How can this inform how you think about the institutions where you have influence, right? And we opened this conversation with a map of the Twin Cities freeways. And so we'll conclude with the observation that we are in a moment of reckoning for our national highway infrastructure as well. The interstate highway system has reached the end of its quote unquote designated life. Next slide. And the white engineers who planned and implemented its construction between the late 1950s and early 1970s intended it to last another 50 years, or last for 50 years. And these men anticipated some aspects of our current moment, like that it would namely that the most of the system's nearly 50,000 miles of bridges and freeways are now in need of substantial repair. But the founding fathers of the interstate freeway system would likely be surprised to hear the indictments leveled against their life's work. Minnesota Highway Commissioner Loyal Zimmerman and his colleagues thought that they were developing a futuristic transportation network that would transform American lives for the better. But what they touted as an engineering miracle is now blamed for destroying communities, segregating cities, spooling out environmentally destructive sprawl, bulldozing homes and businesses, and creating a car-centric infrastructure that is making Americans sick. So do we perpetuate the status quo, or do we go beyond repairing the roads to repair the damage to people's lives, families, and communities? The decisions that we make today will have intergenerational consequences, and history helps us see those connections. We stand at the precipice of a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and that means that it's a critical moment for reflection as well. By accounting for past and present harms, we can open the door for an honest debate about what comes next. And we share the success of our engagement, community engagement with you to also encourage you not to be scared of engaging with these communities in good faith. This is the strongest foundation for the transportation network of the future, one that includes participation from stakeholders who will be most affected by this next phase. And it's also the best avenue to a just future. So at Mapping Prejudice, we always say that once you know these narratives, this history belongs to you. These stories are part of our collective biography as residents of the state of Minnesota and people who are connected in various ways to the university and transportation organizations. We're all living in the house that the U built, that MnDOT built. Our team always tells volunteers that we can tell you about the past, but the future depends on you. And so as we're looking forward, our team is grappling with how we can use our work to cultivate more community on campus. And we're curious about how we can support one another in this charge to grab onto our shared struggles for our collective well-being. And we're excited to open it up for questions and talk about what that might look like for you guys too. So thank you for listening and for being here today. Open it up for a few questions if we have time. I don't know what time it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Can you all hear me again? I want to make sure I'm unmuting properly. Excellent. Well, I want to start things off by saying thank you again to Kirsten, to Kelly, especially, particularly for that I want to say galvanizing call to action. I can tell you, I can guarantee with absolute certainty that it resonates deeply with many of the people on the call today, many of my colleagues here at the Department of Transportation who have been actively engaged in the kind of examination, the kind of analysis, the kind of outreach that you describe so effectively, but also the people from many, many other agencies. I want to specifically call out and give credit to people from the Minnesota Housing and Finance Agency, people from the Department of Human Services, so many more. I can't name them all. I'll have to do a bit of post-production analysis on our attendance today. I've done it in the past, and I know for past Mapping Prejudice programs, we've called in attendees from over 19 different state agencies to come and learn and share. So it's so deeply moving to see that many people still engaging with this process, still eager to learn more about how we can participate. So without any further ado, I just want to say that I know there are folks who are probably going to have to jump off right at noon to go on to other afternoon activities. I'm happy to stay on as long as Kirsten and Kelly are. So if we want to take a few extra moments to answer questions, mostly I've been seeing praise and gratitude pouring in through the messages today. But I did see one question back early on in the program from Nyla at the Minnesota Department of Health. She wanted to ask, do you cover land grant institutions as part of the Dakota Nation? I'm curious if the Truth Project that you mentioned earlier was one of the ways that they are directly examining questions like that.
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. So is it, you're saying, is it an examination of our connection to Indigenous land? Or is that the question?
Yes, essentially. And I think some of those questions were answered a little bit later on, but talking about how the land was, acquired and, yeah. So I think that was covered. I just needed to get into that study to learn a little bit more about those details. Thank you.
And check out the house that you built provides sort of a entry point for that, but we draw on the very, very deep scholarship of the Truth Report here, and there are links to that, and also the High Country News Land Grab U. So we're trying to figure out, like, how do all these things fit together? And that's kind of the house that you built provides sort of a framework to understand the connections a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nyla. Always great to have you online with us. Does anybody else want to chime in and ask any questions while we're wrapping up today? Feel free to use the hand raise function in Teams if you'd like to be called on, or put your questions in chat. We're monitoring them too. Give it just another moment or two for anyone who wants to jump on before we say one final thank you. Yes, AAERG Chair Wael Abdelkader is online as well, and he's got a question or a comment. Go ahead, Wael.
Hi there. I'm not sure if you didn't have to bring my title. I'm just another another guy listening to the conversation. I'm grateful to have that opportunity to be here, and it's amazing to whether the way you structured information or the ending up the question. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? This is a very, very important question to ask, and which kind of being in that space, always ask yourself, and then what? Now what are we gonna do for moving forward? Um, my maybe some thoughts that I had in mind. Are you aware, or are there any organizations or groups or whatnot out there that actively working on the other side of your research, whether motivate or entice or lobby the state to whether give back some of those property that was lost or ownership that was kind of bit gone because of these policies, aside from the state highway, I know Rondo, is gone and not able to get back. Are there any nonprofit or any organization whatsoever out there you're aware of can push for that cause?
Are you saying for land back in particular, or?
Well, whether land back or changing laws or rules, and you pointing the finger. I'm not sure. You're highlighting. You're bringing up the issue, but I don't know if someone taking action, going out and officially, taking the role of let's bring that back. Let's give people the rights. Are there any that you know of or aware of?
Well, I'd love to hear. I think there's probably a lot of expertise and knowledge in this group here of people and organizations that are working. We work with a really wide variety of nonprofits that use our data in all kinds of different ways. So everything from Reconnect Rondo to Our Streets. And again, we are very careful not to say that we create the data and we open the dialogue around the history, and that we are not policymakers. I study bad policy through most of the 20th century, so I understand the art and the science of being very careful about when you propose something. Yeah, so I mean, and another group that we point to is the Alliance, which is a coalition of lots of grassroots community organizations that have created a agenda for policy suggestions too. Or another group that we point to is Homes for All in Minnesota. So there's just so many amazing, smart, committed people working on the ground with a really wide variety of solutions. I think, like, they know a lot of the things that work, and I do believe that one of the most pressing needs is for us to create political will to actually make things happen. So Kelly, do you want to add anything more to that?
Only that someone commented, Leandra, I think is their name, that they are maybe involved. So I would wonder, if anybody has some ideas afterwards, if they wanted to share organizations that they work with. And Galen also shared Reconnect Rondo and a story map about I-94 specifically that's also in the chat. And I would say that those have great information about how people are interpreting the histories of the highways.
Yeah, and Leandra actually has her hand up. So let's call on her next, and she can share the group that she's involved with.
Hi. So yes, I'm Leandra. I posted early on in the conversation that yes, I'm a descendant of the Rondo community whose family was largely displaced in the infrastructure of the I-94. But today, for the past 5 years, have been the face of Habitat for Humanity.
Yes.
Who works very well. They have a pilot program going on now that is solely for Black home ownership. So I would say get involved in some of your local home ownership programs, homeowner financial programs. There's plenty of programs right in your neighborhood, in your communities that you can get involved in that focus on home ownership and the home ownership of Black and Indigenous people. So there's programs but in particular, Habitat for Humanity is amazing and does the work. I also want to say thank you all very, very much. I attended this very similar. You guys did this before with Ramsey County. I was on a forum with them, and this was presented there. And since then, I've been trying to find out, how do I find you guys?
We're
But
how do you find us? Like
yeah.
you can go to our website for sure. Is the website in the chat?
Uh,
Uh,
go to the next slide, Kirsten.
Okay, right.
I'm going to repost the Mapping Prejudice main. I did already post the link to your resources page, but I'll put the URL for your homepage in the chat too.
Yeah, we are easy to, I mean, I don't, yeah, we are very
Available.
available. That's the word that I was looking, yes, for.
And we also,
and shout out to Habitat too. We've been working with
Yeah.
Habitat for
Yes.
years, and yeah, so thank you for your work.
Thank you.
there's
That's
also
excellent.
information on our website about transcript or community mapping sessions. And our community engagement lead has been developing a specific program for people who are more impacted by the history, whether, you know, just like by the racial language that's used, to create a sensitized sort of experience that acknowledges that and is more trauma informed, so that participants can kind of choose their level of engagement too, with helping us build out our map, if that's of interest to anyone. And that's on our website as well.
And I just another shout out too, like we are now actively mapping racial covenants in 7 counties, including counties across Minnesota, but also in Washington, D.C., North Carolina. You know, with sneak preview, we're going to be opening up a new project in California in a couple weeks. So this work is really continuing to snowball, but we can only do it with engagement, with in collaboration with community members. So please spread the word. The work is not done, and we are really looking for active participation from as many people as possible.
Excellent. Sorry, I was just doing a little bit of research there. AAERG, fellow AAERG ally Mary Schafel put in the chat that in a response to someone's question, she referred to Christopher Lehman's book, Hidden in or Slavery's Reach, which jogged my memory that Dr. Lehman actually presented that book to our ERG a couple of years back, and so I put the link to that recording in there, publicly available on YouTube, which is great. So does anybody have any other questions before we adjourn for today? Let our wonderful presenters get on with their schedule, and let all of us busy state workers get back to ours. No? Well, excellent. I just, again, want to say thank you to the both of you. I can't tell you how crucial the call to action you provided to us is in this day, in this age, given the pressures that we're all facing, the social forces that we see arrayed across the nation today. So calls for reaching out, for learning more, for communicating with one another could not come at a more crucial time. And so it is such a pleasure to host you two back here, to meet you for the first time, Kelly. Hope we will see more of your work, read more of your words in the future. Today was just a great day to learn more and to come together. Thanks to all of those of you who are still on with us today. We've got more exciting programming from MnDOT's AAERG coming in the coming months. Of course, if any of you from your own home agencies have employee resource group activities that you would like our help in cross-promoting, please reach out to me or any other members of the AAERG. We are more than happy to cross-promote, to share, to participate, and learn more about our world, our past, and what we can do together. So thank you all again. I'm going to stop the recording now. Yeah, it was great having you here. Thank you again, Kelly and Kirsten. We'll be in touch shortly.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day, guys.
Gillian. Thank you, Gillian. Everybody.
Thank
Wow,
you.
it's amazing.